Colombian President Iván Duque declared that the Colombian government was going to create a new commando that was going to be part of the National Army, and that this specific commando is going to be located in the border of the Norte de Santander with Venezuela. Following pretty controversial declarations from General Luis Fernando Navarro, who explained that Venezuela was not only giving protection to the Marxist terrorist group FARC and ELN, but also other criminal organizations that are deeply involved with drug trafficking. Naturally, Duque's declaration made many people wonder whether an armed conflict with Venezuela was possible or not. The truth is, this is a pretty complicated subject, considering that if we're talking about armed conflicts and war between countries, especially between neighboring countries, the truth is that unpredictability is the norm. I mean, there are many reasons to suggest that such an armed conflict between Venezuela and Colombia will be essentially impossible, will be off the table. However, it is an undeniable fact that wars across the world usually start with a single situation, with a simple situation that at the moment many people actually don't believe it could eventually lead to an armed conflict. And to be honest, there are many reasons why Colombia should feel somehow threatened by the Venezuelan regime. After all, we need to take into consideration that Marxist terrorist groups FARC and ELN have always claimed to be against the Colombian state and has always claimed that their main objective is essentially to overthrow the Colombian government. So the fact that the Venezuelan regime is giving protections to both terrorist groups is quite delicate, because we're basically talking about a couple of members planning attacks on Colombian soil from Venezuela, with the Venezuelan regime providing basically a safe haven, providing the liberty to move around the countries and basically to maintain their drug trafficking operations, demanding only a substantial cut of the profits. Naturally, if we're going to think about an hypothetical armed conflict between these two nations, it is impossible not to consider the next year's presidential elections here in Colombia. After all, it will all depend on the person who eventually becomes the country's president, and currently the main figure that most polls suggest is going to be the winner is leftist candidate Gustavo Petro, who many believe, me included, that in case he eventually gets to the Palacio de Nariño in Bogotá, he will become an ally of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. And of course, if this happens, it is almost impossible that a war between Venezuela and Colombia takes place, considering that for the first time since the Chavismo got into power in Caracas, Venezuela and Colombia will be allies. And of course, in case then the most radical right-winger gets into the Palacio de Nariño in Bogotá, even if that person plans to perpetrate some kind of attack to Venezuela, feeling legitimately threatened, that will be quite complicated, because no one could imagine this type of move, this type of action, this type of operation from the Colombian government without counting with the approval of Washington, which remains the most important ally of Colombia. So the truth is, we're currently in a pretty delicate situation, and unfortunately, it wouldn't be a surprise if something more delicate happens over the next few months or possibly the next few years. Reporting from Medellin, Colombia, Luis Orozco, Newsweek.